An unidentified person known as the Phantom Killer committed several murders and assaults in Texarkana through the spring of 1946. 5 people lost their lives, and 3 others were wounded. Almost 400 suspects were arrested throughout the investigations, yet nobody has ever been convicted of these crimes.
Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder. This is a brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Sometimes it's a vodcast. If you're watching it on YouTube, did I just make that up? Combining podcast and video. Vodcast? I may have stolen that from someone. If not, that term officially belongs to me. For a nominal fee, you can use it. My name is Joe, BTW. I'm the host, and I appreciate you joining today. If you have not yet subscribed to 10-Minute Murder, please take a moment to do that now so that you'll be always up to date with the newest episodes. If you connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media, you'll know exactly when new episodes are out. Plus, you see the visuals that go along with what we're talking about here. And every now and then, I try to remember to mention that if you're listening in a place that allows ratings and reviews like Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, I hope you'll give me 5 stars or whatever that equivalent is. That helps this little podcast grow and reach more of the true crime community that may not already know about this podcast. Vodcast. Whatever it is. Okay, now to today's creepy story. The attacks began on February 22nd, 1946. That day, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and 19-year-old Mary Larry had gone to see a movie and then parked on a local Lover's Lane just outside of town. And in case you youngins are listening and have never heard of Lover's Lane, it's where couples go to park and make out. Ask your grandparents about it, they'll know. Mary and Jimmy's date was suddenly interrupted by a man wearing a white sack. Most likely it was a pillowcase with the eye holes and mouth holes cut out. The guy had just appeared out of nowhere. He pointed a flashlight into Jimmy and Mary's eyes and ordered them to get out of the vehicle at gunpoint. At first, they thought it was just some kind of sick prank, and Jimmy told him he must have the wrong person. But as the man said, quote, "I don't want to kill you, fellow, so do what I say," they realized the person was not just playing around. So they complied, and the man told Jimmy to take off his effing pants before beating him so badly with the gun that the young man's skull was cracked in 2 places. After attacking Jimmy, the hooded man turned his attention to Mary. She thought the guy wanted to rob them, so Mary showed them Jimmy's wallet to prove that they had no money, which didn't make the situation any better. The man proceeded to strike Mary in the head and then told her to run. But as Mary tried to escape, the attacker caught up with her and asked why she was running, like he didn't just tell her to do exactly that. When Mary responded, saying he told her to, the hooded man called her a liar, knocked her down, and then sexually assaulted her with the barrel of his gun. Finally, headlights from an oncoming car caused the attacker to run away, and Mary then ran a half a mile to a nearby house and called the police. And meanwhile, Jimmy had somehow regained consciousness despite his severe injuries and alerted a passing motorist to get help. He had been hospitalized for several days, but Mary survived without serious physical injuries. Lifelong psychological traumas, however, were guaranteed. When interviewed by the police, they gave differing descriptions of the assailant. Mary said that he had been a light-skinned African American, but Jimmy believed the man was white. Being blinded by a flashlight and then being hit in the head multiple times could have something to do with the difficulties of describing the attacker, but both agreed that the hooded man was around 6 feet tall. So, maybe black, possibly white, and a very average height. The second attack took place just a month later, but this time, the victims were not as fortunate as the first ones. On the morning of Sunday, March 24th, 29-year-old Richard Griffin and his girlfriend, 17-year-old Polly Moore, were found dead inside a car parked on the Lover's Lane. And I know what you're thinking. She's under 18 and he's nearly 30. Not that it justifies it, but it was 1946, and that wasn't as weird as it is now. Richard and Polly had been shot several times in the back of the head with a .32 caliber revolver. And based on the evidence found at the scene, The police concluded the couple had been killed outside the vehicle and then placed back inside. 3 weeks later, on April 14th, two friends, 17-year-old Paul Martin and 15-year-old Betty Booker, were found dead in Spring Lake Park on the Texas side, with their bodies found some distance away from their car. Paul had been shot 4 times, and his body was left lying in the northern edge of North Park Road. Betty was found 5 hours later. Why so much later? Because she was dumped almost 2 miles away from Paul's body. She had been shot twice. Again, a .32 caliber was the murder weapon. The term serial murderer or serial killer was not yet a thing. That happened in the 1970s, but authorities were sure that the same person was behind both cases, even if they didn't use the term serial killer. Many sources state that Polly and Betty were also raped before they were shot to death, but the claim has just been a rumor and not based on actual evidence. Nevertheless, Texarkana was on high alert. Citizens bought weapons, stayed in their homes at night, and began to lock their doors, which was not common back then. The next assault proved that nobody was safe, not even inside their own house. In the first week of May, a husband and a wife were attacked in their farmhouse in Miller County. 37-year-old Virgil Starks was sitting in an armchair reading the newspaper when he was shot twice in the back of the head through a window. His wife, 36-year-old Katie, ran to call the police and was shot twice in the face while trying to get to the phone. But she somehow survived. Even though she was almost blinded by her own blood, Katie was able to escape and run barefoot across the street to her sister and brother-in-law's house. An investigation on the scene turned up a flashlight, bloody footprints, and tire tracks. Although a different gun was used, this time a .22 caliber pistol, police announced that the person responsible for the previous double murders also attacked the Starks. Some have later believed that the attack was actually the work of a different person due to the different MO, but back in 1946, the Starks were seen as victims of the same perpetrator than the other couples. The media, of course, needed to come up with some kind of catchy name for the crimes at this point, and so the murders were dubbed the Moonlight Murders. And because the attacker seemed to appear out of nowhere and strike and vanish, he was given the moniker Phantom Killer. But as suddenly as he had appeared, as quickly the Phantom Killer disappeared. After attacking the Starks, he stopped, and it's not known if he ever killed anyone else. Over the years, there have been an endless amount of theories of the identity of the Phantom Killer. Many people have claimed they know who the man is, and others have claimed they are the Phantom Killer. One man, 18-year-old H.B. Duty Tennyson, his nickname is Duty. Hi, my name is H.B., but my friends call me Duty. Duty was a student at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville who came from a prominent Texarkana family. He killed himself in November 1948. He left behind a suicide note, which he confessed to the murder spree. However, investigators were unable to find any actual evidence linking Duty to the crimes. After posting a reward in an effort to gain new information on the case, the police were basically drowning in false leads, and an endless amount of people were ruled out as suspects one by one. However, there was one person who many still believe was the Phantom Killer, even though he never was charged with the murders, a repeat offender named Ewell Swinney. In July 1946, police arrested him for stealing cars. When he was taken in, the young man asked a weird question, quote, "Will they give me the chair?" That question, put together with the fact that before each murder there were reports of a car being stolen, led police to believe that they had just arrested the Phantom Killer. Ewell's wife, Peggy, even initially implicated him in the Texarkana Moonlight murders and described the murder of Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin in great detail. But as she later changed her story and then refused to testify against her husband, plus there being no physical evidence, Ewell was never prosecuted for the Phantom Killer murders. Ewell Swinney ended up being behind bars anyway for car theft in 1947 and was not released before 1973. And interesting, the Phantom Killer never struck again after Ewell was arrested. He died in 1994, and to this day, we don't know whether or not he had anything to do with the Moonlight murders. Journalist James Presley, who wrote a book about the Phantom Killer, has commented how strongly that many believe Ewell Swinney was the murderer, saying, quote, "I dare say, every lawman who worked this case never quit mulling over the story in hopes of turning out hard evidence that could have convicted Swinney of the murders. Unfortunately, even if Ewell really was the Phantom Killer, we might never know for sure. Almost 80 years have passed since the murders, and it would be pretty much a miracle at this point to find concrete evidence of guilt after all of this time. And during the extensive investigation, thousands of leads have been followed and hundreds of people questioned. But to this day, the identity of the Phantom Killer remains officially unknown. While theoretically it's still open, the Moonlight murders is considered a cold case. That's today's 10-minute murder. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thank you for being a part of it today. And before you go, look wherever you're listening right now or watching right now. And be sure to subscribe to 10-Minute Murder. Connect on social media as well. Links for that are in the show notes. And if you have any friends, neighbors, acquaintances, DoorDash delivery people, anybody, you think they may be interested in hearing about true crime stories in a brief way, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Be safe and have a good night.